The transport shuttle drifted down through the emerald sky of Althara. Inside, Mira sat with her hands resting on her knees. She had crossed 3 star systems to reach this alien world. She had trained for months to act as a negotiator between Earth and the insect-like Althari, a species that had once fought bitter skirmishes along the outer colonies. Mira repeated her mission in her head like a prayer. She was here to speak calmly, to find common ground, and to keep both sides from sliding back into conflict. When the shuttle door opened, a wave of sweet, strange air rolled in. The scent of flowers mixed with the hum of alien engines. Mira stepped down onto a landing platform made from a smooth, glassy stone that glowed faintly under her boots. Beyond the platform rose the towers of the Queen's palace, like green crystal spears stretching into the clouds. Soldiers stood in neat rows along the path, their segmented armor reflecting the sunlight. They watched her with many-faceted eyes, silent and still. An attendant led her toward a grand hall. The doors were carved with spirals of silver and gold, showing scenes of the Althari's history. Mira took a slow breath. She had practiced the greetings of their language, learned their customs, even memorized how to bow without insulting anyone. Still, her heart beat fast. This was not just a meeting. This was a chance to change the future between 2 worlds. The hall was vast, the ceiling high enough to hold a small ship. Pillars of green crystal lined the walls, and at the far end, on a raised platform, sat the Queen. She was taller than the other Althari, her chitin a deep blue with streaks of silver. A long, translucent veil hung from her crest, sparkling like morning dew. Around her stood nobles, priests, and guards. They clicked and hissed softly among themselves as Mira approached. Mira bowed as she had been taught, lowering her head and placing a hand over her chest. She spoke the words of greeting in the Althari tongue, careful to form each sound with respect. Her voice echoed through the hall. The Queen tilted her head slightly, a sign of acknowledgement. For a moment, everything felt steady. Mira believed she could manage this. Then movement caught her eye. From behind the Queen stepped a small figure, no taller than a human child of 5. It was the Queen's offspring. Its chitin was pale green, soft with youth, and its large dark eyes shone with curiosity. The child trotted down the steps on delicate legs, wobbling a little as it approached Mira. The nobles murmured. It was unusual for the youngling to leave the Queen's side during formal ceremony. Mira hesitated, unsure if she should kneel or step back. She held perfectly still as the child reached her. It stared up at her face with a strange, bright expression. Then it lifted one small clawed hand and pointed at her. Its mouth opened, and a clear, ringing voice spoke a single word in the Althari language. Parent. The sound cut through the hall like a blade. The whisper stopped. The guards froze. Even the Queen's veil quivered as she straightened in her seat. Mira blinked, not certain she had heard correctly. She glanced at the attendant beside her, but the attendant looked as shocked as everyone else. The child repeated the word again, more firmly this time. Parent. It reached out with both hands toward Mira as if expecting her to pick it up. Mira's heart thudded. She had studied their language. She knew the basic terms. Parent was not a casual word. It meant origin, guide, protector. It was a sacred title in their culture, linked to destiny and leadership. Mira slowly crouched to bring herself level with the youngling. Hello there, she whispered in her own language. She did not touch it. She simply met its dark eyes and tried to look calm. Inside, confusion swirled. Why had the child chosen her? Was this some kind of test or a mistake? All around, the court had gone silent. The nobles exchanged glances. The priests drew back their hoods. The guards shifted their weapons uneasily. A ripple of tension moved through the hall like a living thing. The Queen stood from her throne, her tall frame casting a long shadow. Her eyes, black and shining, fixed on Mira. You hear the word? The Queen said at last, her voice deep and resonant. Do you understand what it means? Mira straightened slowly. I believe I do, Your Majesty, she said in careful Althari. Her voice was steady, though her pulse raced. But I am only a negotiator from Earth. I am not the parent of your child. The Queen stepped down from the platform, each movement graceful and deliberate. She came to stand beside the youngling, who still reached for Mira. The child does not speak lightly, the Queen said. It names what it sees. Mira glanced around the hall. Every eye was on her. She felt the weight of their gaze like a heavy cloak. She wanted to step back, but she forced herself to remain still. The child's hands were still outstretched. Mira raised her own hand slightly in a gesture of peace. I mean no disrespect, she said softly. I came only to talk. The queen's antennae moved slowly, a sign of deep thought. Perhaps you came for more than talk, she said. Then she touched the child's shoulder and guided it gently back toward the platform. The court began to murmur again, voices rising in a strange, clicking chorus. Mira stood alone at the center of the hall, feeling the air thick with tension. Her mission had just changed. She no longer felt like a negotiator. She felt like a piece in a game she did not yet understand. And the word the child had spoken still echoed in her mind, heavy with meaning. Parent. The grand hall of the Althari Palace no longer felt like a place of welcome. It felt like a living sea of eyes and wings. After the queen guided her small offspring back to the platform, the whispers began. They started as low clicks and hisses, but soon the sound grew louder and sharper, echoing against the crystal pillars. Mira stood in the center, aware of every glance fixed on her. She had prepared for political tension, but nothing like this. The attendant who had escorted Mira leaned close, his mandibles trembling. They are saying the old word, he whispered in rough galactic standard. They are saying the word chosen. He looked at her again with wide dark eyes. You must stay calm. Mira nodded once. She kept her posture steady, her arms at her sides. She remembered her training on Earth. When surrounded by unknown customs, show respect, show patience, listen more than you speak. Yet her mind raced. Why had the youngling called her that word? Was this a cultural misunderstanding? Or was something much larger happening? The queen raised one long arm and the whispers fell to a hush. The court will retire for now, she said in a voice that carried to every corner. I will speak with the envoy in private. The nobles bowed low, their cloaks sweeping the floor. Guards opened side doors and the crowd filed out in lines, still murmuring. Even as they left, they kept glancing back at Mira as though she carried a new kind of power. 2 guards stepped forward and gestured for Mira to follow. She walked between them, her boots clicking on the stone floor. The hallway beyond the throne room was narrower but still lined with carvings. Scenes of battles, coronations, and births glowed faintly in the green light. Mira kept her head high. She had not done anything wrong. She had only stood still and listened to a child. Yet the child's single word had changed everything. The guards led her into a round chamber hung with shimmering banners. A pool of clear water lay at the center, reflecting the crystal ceiling above. The queen entered after her, taller and heavier than the guards, her silver streaks gleaming like small stars. The youngling followed at her side but stayed close to the door. The queen raised a hand and the guards left, sealing the door behind them. Mira stood alone with the queen and the child. The air in the chamber was cooler, carrying the faint smell of rain. She folded her hands together to keep them from trembling. Your Majesty, she said in careful Althari, if I have broken any custom, please forgive me. I only came to discuss peace between our worlds. The queen regarded her in silence for a moment, antennae slowly moving. You have broken nothing, she said. You have awakened something. Mira frowned slightly. I do not understand. The word my child spoke is not a word to be given lightly, the queen said. Parent is a title from our oldest songs. It is more than a caretaker. It is one who shapes, one who guides. It is one who stands between chaos and order for the sake of the young. Among our people, the title carries prophecy. Mira's breath caught. She thought of the old carvings she had glimpsed in the hall, figures holding small Althari. You believe your child has chosen me because of a prophecy, she said slowly. The queen's dark eyes reflected her face. Not believe, no. She stepped closer, her height forcing Mira to tilt her head up. Long before your kind walked among the stars, our seers spoke of a being from another sky who would guide the heir of Althara into a new age. They named this figure Parent. Today my child named you. Mira tried to steady her voice. I am only an envoy. I am not a guide for rulers. I am not a parent to your heir. The queen tilted her head. Yet the child saw you and named you. That cannot be undone. Behind the queen, the youngling peered around her legs. It made a soft chirping sound and raised its small arms again. Mira felt a tug in her chest. She had worked with children before, during relief missions on damaged colonies. She knew the look of a frightened child seeking safety. But this was no ordinary child. This was the future ruler of a world. What does this mean for me? Mira asked. And for Earth? It means you will stay here, the queen said. You will be honored and watched. You will be taught our ways and we will see if the prophecy holds. The court will test you. They will test your courage, your patience, and your heart. Mira hesitated. And if I fail? The Queen's antennae stilled. Then our worlds will face a harder road. Silence filled the chamber. Mira glanced at the pool of water and saw her own reflection, pale and small compared to the tall alien beside her. She had thought she was arriving as a visitor. Now she was something else, something she had not chosen. She looked back at the child. Its eyes were round and bright. It chirped again softly, almost like a question. Mira crouched slowly, bringing herself closer to its level. She extended her hand, palm open but not touching. "Hello again," she whispered in Galactic Standard. "I'm Mira." The youngling tilted its head and pressed one small clawed hand against hers. The contact was light, almost weightless, but it felt like a promise. The Queen watched silently. In that moment, Mira felt the hallways of training, treaties, and careful speeches falling away. She felt the living presence of a child who might shape the future of two species, and she felt the eyes of an entire civilization waiting to see what she would do next. The next morning on Althara began with soft green light filtering through the crystal walls of the guest chamber. Mira sat on the edge of a low bed, her boots on the floor and her hands clasped. She had not slept much. All night she had replayed the events of the court in her mind. The child calling her parent. The Queen's calm but heavy words. The promise of tests. She felt like a small stone that had rolled into a river and changed the flow of the water without meaning to. A chime echoed through the chamber. The door slid open and the same attendant from the previous day stepped in, carrying a tray of food. The food looked like a collection of glowing petals and soft fruits, but it smelled sweet and clean. "You are summoned to the Hall of Records," the attendant said in careful Galactic Standard. His mandibles clicked nervously. "The Queen's advisors wish to show you something." Mira rose and straightened her jacket. "All right," she said. "Lead the way." They walked through long corridors that curved like the inside of a shell. The walls were carved with old images and symbols. Mira noticed that many of the carvings showed tall beings holding small Althari children. Some had shapes that were almost human, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Others were vague shadows with outstretched hands. She felt a shiver at the back of her neck. These images had been made long before humans had known Althara existed. The Hall of Records was a vast circular room beneath the palace. Light poured from cracks in the crystal ceiling above, falling on rows of tall stone tablets. A group of advisors stood waiting, their robes covered in intricate markings. They bowed slightly when Mira entered. In the center of the room rose a single great slab carved with a deep relief. It showed an alien child reaching up to a taller figure. The figure's face had worn away over time, but its outline was clear. 2 arms, 2 legs, a shape very much like her own. One advisor, older and with a darker crest, stepped forward. "This is the song of the first parent," he said in the Althari language. Mira listened carefully. "It tells of a time when our people were without guidance. The skies were full of storms and our nests were divided. Then came one from beyond, not of our kind. This one taught the heir of the hive to lead with wisdom and not with claws. Together they built a peace that lasted 3 ages. The one from beyond was called Parent." Another advisor gestured to the carving. "The child of our queen spoke that word yesterday. It is a sign. The prophecy has returned." Mira studied the stone slab. She traced the shape of the tall figure with her eyes. The story was older than human contact. It could not have been planted or faked. "And you believe I am this parent," she said slowly. The older advisor tilted his head. "We believe you have been chosen. Whether you are truly the parent will be revealed through action, not words." The Queen entered the hall as the advisors stepped aside. She walked to the carving and placed one long hand on the child's image. "When my offspring spoke yesterday, the court felt the echo of this story," she said. "Some are afraid. Some are hopeful. All will watch." Mira met her gaze. "I am a diplomat," she said. "I am not a ruler, not a guardian of heirs. I came to make a treaty." The Queen's antennae moved slowly. "Sometimes a treaty is not written with ink but with lives. You are here now. My child reached for you. That is our beginning." The youngling trotted into the hall, its claws clicking softly. It stopped near Mira and chirped, a soft rising sound. Mira knelt to its level and offered her hand again. The child touched her palm with its small claws as if confirming its choice. The Queen watched them. "The advisors will prepare the first test," she said. "It is called the bonding. It measures the connection between our heir and the one named Parent. In the past, it was a ritual of story and scent. Now it will also test your courage, Mira straightened. What does it involve? You will enter a living chamber where our minds can touch, the queen said. You will see the hopes and fears of my child. You must stand firm. You must give comfort, not command. If you succeed, the court will accept your role. If you fail, they will turn against you and peace will be harder. Mira's throat felt dry. She had trained in negotiation, in law, in cross-species etiquette. She had not trained to guide the mind of an alien heir, yet she felt a strange calm at the sight of the child. Its eyes were dark and full of questions, but it was still a child. Children wanted safety. Children wanted someone to listen. I will do my best, she said quietly. The queen inclined her head. That is all any parent can do. The advisors began to hum a low, steady note, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the air. We will prepare the chamber, the older one said. At first light you will be called. Mira looked once more at the carving on the stone slab. The faceless figure stood tall, a hand outstretched to the child. She imagined herself in that place, imagined holding a future she did not yet understand. She thought of Earth and the leaders waiting for her report. They expected a signature on a treaty, not a role in a prophecy. She wondered what they would say if they could see her now. The youngling chirped again, a softer sound this time. Mira crouched and whispered, I hope I can help you. The child blinked and tilted its head as if trying to understand her words. The queen's antennae twitched. The first step has been taken, she said. Prepare your heart, Mira of Earth. Tomorrow will show us who you truly are. Mira rose and followed the attendant out of the hall. The carvings on the walls seemed to watch her as she walked. She no longer felt like a guest. She felt like someone stepping into an ancient story, one that had been waiting for her long before she arrived. The dawn on Althera came like a slow tide of green and gold. Light poured through the high windows of the guest chamber, waking Mira before the chime of the door. She rose at once, dressed in the plain but formal jacket she had worn the first day, and took a long, steady breath. Today was the day of the bonding. Today she would find out what the court truly thought of her. The same attendant entered, bowing slightly. It is time, he said. His antennae flicked with unease, but his voice stayed polite. Please follow me. Mira followed him through a maze of passages that sloped downward. The air grew cooler and smelled faintly of damp soil and flowers. Along the walls glowed strands of living moss, casting soft light on carvings of spirals and eyes. The deeper they went, the more Mira felt as though she were moving into the heart of the planet. Her footsteps echoed against the stone floor. They reached a set of tall doors made of pale crystal. 2 guards stood on either side. Their armor shone faintly and their long weapons were held upright. Without a word, they opened the doors. A low hum spilled out from within, a sound like both wind and heartbeat. The chamber beyond was round and alive. Its walls were covered in a living membrane that pulsed with slow light. At the center lay a shallow pool of luminous liquid. Thin roots hung from the ceiling, dipping into the pool and quivering gently as if breathing. The scent of the air was sweet but also sharp like new leaves after rain. The queen stood beside the pool, taller and more imposing than ever, her silver streaks bright in the glowing light. The youngling clung to her leg but peeked out at Mira with wide dark eyes. Several advisors stood along the walls, chanting in low tones. Their voices wove together into a single continuous note. Mira stepped into the chamber and felt the air shift around her, as if the room itself were aware of her. She stopped a few paces from the queen. I am ready, she said softly. The queen nodded once. You will kneel at the edge of the pool. My child will kneel opposite you. The chamber will join your minds. You will see its fears and hopes. You must respond with truth and with care. Do not try to command. Do not run from what you see. Mira moved to the edge of the pool and knelt. The surface of the liquid shimmered like liquid glass. The youngling moved to the opposite side, knees touching the glowing edge. It looked at her and chirped once. Mira gave it a small, calm smile. When the advisors raised their arms, the roots above dipped lower and touched the liquid. Light flared. The hum deepened until Mira felt it in her chest. A faint mist rose from the pool. Mira breathed it in before she could stop herself. The scent was sweet and dizzying. Her vision blurred. In an instant, she was no longer kneeling in a room, but standing in a wide-open plain of green sky. Shapes of light drifted like birds overhead. Before her stood the youngling, but now it was larger, its eyes shining with swirling colors. Images flickered around them. Dark tunnels filled with echoing cries, bright nests full of warmth, the touch of claws, the taste of sweet sap. Feelings rushed at her, not in words but in sensations, fear, hope, loneliness, curiosity. Mira steadied herself. She remembered the Queen's instructions. Do not command. Do not run. She focused on the small figure before her. She opened her hands to show she carried nothing. I am here, she said aloud. Though she did not know if words would carry, the youngling made a high sound and an image of a huge shadow swept across the plain. The sky darkened. The child's shape trembled. Mira felt its fear as if it were her own heartbeat. She forced herself to stay calm. She crouched low so her eyes were level with its eyes. It's all right, she whispered. You are not alone. The shadow above them shrank and faded. The plain grew brighter. The youngling took a hesitant step toward her. Another rush of feeling hit Mira. This time a memory of the court, of nobles turning their faces away, of the weight of expectation pressing on small shoulders. The youngling's eyes filled with dark color. It feared failing. It feared being alone in a world of watchers. Mira reached out, palm open. You are not alone, she said again. She thought of all the children she had helped in disaster zones, of the quiet strength it took to sit beside someone who was afraid. She held that memory like a light and offered it wordlessly. Warmth spread through the space between them. The youngling pressed its small claws against her hand. A rush of light burst around them. The plane shifted to an image of a great bridge between two worlds spanning stars. Mira felt a surge of hope from the child mixed with wonder. It was not just afraid. It was curious about her world, about what could be built. Then the vision dissolved. The green plane vanished. The scent faded. Mira blinked and found herself back in the chamber, still kneeling at the edge of the pool. Her heart pounded. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Across from her, the youngling blinked slowly, its claws still resting on the edge of the pool. It chirped, a soft sound that rose like a question but ended like a song. The Queen stepped forward. Her antennae moved in a slow pattern of acknowledgement. The chamber shows truth, she said. My child has accepted you. It has shared its mind and found no threat. The advisors bowed low. The hum of their voices became a rising chord of approval. Mira lowered her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. She had not commanded. She had not run. She had simply stayed. Yet she felt changed, as if the chamber had left a mark inside her. The Queen reached out one long hand to help her stand. You have taken the first true step, she said. The court will hear of this. They will see you not as a stranger, but as one who has touched the heir's spirit. Mira rose, steadying herself. The youngling trotted around the pool and stopped beside her, pressing its small head lightly against her leg. The touch was light but full of meaning. Mira placed a careful hand above its crest. Around them the chamber glowed brighter, as if recognizing a bond newly formed. The news of Mira passing the bonding test spread through the palace faster than any message could travel. By mid-morning, the halls were alive with whispers and quiet clicks. Nobles in deep robes paused as she passed. Soldiers leaned forward, their many-faceted eyes watching her carefully. Some offered nods of respect, while others glanced away, their antennae twitching in disapproval. Mira could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her with every step. The Queen called her to the throne hall, a place where only those of the highest rank were allowed. Mira followed the attendants down corridors she had not walked before. The walls here were darker, the carvings sharper. She glimpsed past conflicts frozen in stone and glass. Images of warriors, rulers, and leaders standing side by side with children. Mira felt the same chill she had felt when she first saw the Hall of Records. History seemed to reach for her, inviting her to become a part of it. When she entered, the hall was half empty, yet the tension was palpable. Some nobles had come forward, whispering and hissing quietly to one another. Others watched from balconies above. The Queen sat on her raised platform, her posture regal and calm. The youngling, now small and cautious, stood beside her, glancing toward Mira as if seeking reassurance. The Queen's gaze met Mira's, steady and commanding. Sit, the Queen said, and Mira obeyed, lowering herself onto a polished floor mat before the throne. You have passed the bonding. That much is clear. But the court is not yet united. Some see this as a blessing, others as an insult. They will test your patience, your judgment, and your courage. Mira nodded slowly. I understand, Your Majesty. I am willing to learn what the court expects. A tall noble stepped forward. His chiton gleamed black and silver, and his mandibles clicked sharply. If a human may be called parent, then what of our traditions? Are they no longer sacred? His voice carried through the hall like a warning. Do we now follow outsiders instead of our own? Another noble hissed in reply, her crest glowing faint red. The prophecy has always spoken of one from beyond. Perhaps this is the time we feared yet hoped for. Let us see if she is worthy. Mira listened, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She felt a pang of unease. She was no warrior. She was no general. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of alien politics, with every faction weighing her worth. She remembered the child's eyes during the bonding test, full of trust and curiosity. That memory steadied her. The queen raised one hand and the court fell silent. Your judgment matters, she said. Mira has faced the first challenge. She has bonded with my offspring without harm, without fear. That alone is rare, yet her role is only beginning. One of the advisors stepped forward, his robes etched with gold lines. The next challenge will be public. It will test how Mira handles conflict and leadership. A group of nobles who oppose the prophecy will present an obstacle, and she must act wisely. Mira took a deep breath. I will do my best. The queen's dark eyes softened slightly. You must. This court watches not only with eyes but with hearts. If you fail, we all suffer. If you succeed, hope grows. Over the next hours, Mira moved among the palace chambers, meeting nobles, listening to whispers, and observing reactions. She learned that some factions still believed the child's naming of her as parent was a trick or a mistake. Others whispered that the prophecy was real, and she was destined to guide the heir to greatness. Mira could not rely on fear or authority. She had only trust, understanding, and careful words. That evening, a small group of allies approached her in a quiet corridor. One was an advisor who had smiled at her during the bonding. Another was a soldier who had watched her quietly but with respect. You have shown courage and calm, the advisor said. The youngling trusts you. That is more than most have achieved. If you can keep their trust, the court may follow. Mira nodded. I do not know how to lead your people, she admitted. But I can listen. I can guide where the child needs me. That is all I can do. The soldier's multiple eyes blinked in agreement. Sometimes that is enough. Strength is not only in claws or arms. Sometimes it is in the heart. Mira smiled faintly. The words reminded her of Earth, of leaders who had won by patience and wisdom rather than force. Perhaps she could do the same here. Perhaps she could build a bridge not just between the youngling and the court, but between her world and Althara. That night, Mira returned to the guest chamber. The youngling waited by the doorway, chirping softly. Mira knelt and extended her hands. The child pressed its small claws into hers. A warmth spread through her chest, a silent affirmation. In that moment, she realized something. This was not just a test of courage or diplomacy. This was a test of connection, of care, and of responsibility. The child's trust had given her a new kind of strength, one that could not be measured in battle or words alone. Mira lay on the low bed that night and thought about what the next day might bring. The court was divided. Tensions were rising, but she had allies, small though they were. More importantly, she had the trust of the youngling. That bond could change everything. If she could nurture it, if she could act with patience and understanding, she might be able to unite factions that had long been at odds. As the green light of Althara's dawn faded to gold, Mira closed her eyes. She was no longer just a visitor. She was part of something much larger, a story older than the stars themselves, and she would face whatever challenges came next, guided by the small hand that had first reached out to hers. The palace of Althara was quiet in the early morning, but Mira sensed the tension that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. She had spent the night preparing herself, thinking of the lessons from the bonding test and the trust she had earned from the youngling. Yet she knew the coming hours would be far more dangerous. Today, the court would challenge her. Some wanted to see her fail. Others watched to see if she could lead in the midst of chaos. The queen summoned her to the central hall and Mira followed, her steps steady. The youngling walked beside her, small but alert, its dark eyes reflecting the glowing pillars. The hall was filled with nobles, soldiers, and advisors all waiting. Some whispered to each other, their mandibles clicking sharply. Others remained silent, their antennae twitching as they observed her closely. The queen's voice rang out, calm but firm. The court has spoken. A trial will show the strength of the one named parent. Today you must protect my child from those who wish harm. Your courage, your judgment, and your calm will decide if the prophecy holds. Mira bowed her head slightly. I understand. At that moment, a group of masked figures stepped forward from the shadows of the hall. Their armor was dark, edged with red streaks, and their weapons glinted in the light. They were the nobles who opposed the prophecy, those who believed no outsider could guide the heir of Althara. Their eyes met hers, challenging, daring her to step aside. Mira's heart raced, but she did not falter. She remembered the child's trust and the quiet strength she had felt during the bonding test. She glanced at the youngling, who pressed close to her side, chirping softly. Mira gently placed a hand on its shoulder. Stay close, she whispered. The masked figures advanced, weapons raised. The hall erupted with murmurs and clicks. Some nobles cheered them on. Others looked away, unsure of the outcome. Mira kept her stance calm, raising her hands to show she carried nothing that could harm. I do not seek to fight, she said clearly, but I will not allow harm to come to the youngling. One of the masked nobles lunged forward. Mira stepped to the side, guiding the child behind a crystal pillar. The motion was quick and precise. She had not been trained in combat like Althari soldiers, but she had learned observation, prediction, and timing from her diplomatic missions. The attacker's strike missed, and Mira used the momentum to block the path, her voice firm. Stop, this is not the way. Another attacker approached, and Mira realized that force alone would not succeed. She needed to calm the situation. She raised her voice, strong and steady. I will not fight you. I only ask you to see reason. This child is not a weapon. It is the future of your people. Protect it, or you endanger everything you claim to honor. The hall went silent, the weight of her words pressing on everyone present. The youngling chirped, and a strange calm seemed to settle over the masked nobles. They hesitated, unsure. Mira took a deep breath and stepped forward again, her eyes meeting theirs. I am not here to take your place. I am here to stand with you. If we work together, your traditions will be honored. If we fight, your people will suffer. A tense moment passed. Then, slowly, the attackers lowered their weapons. Their antennae twitched as if considering her words. One by one, they stepped back. The hall exhaled, a collective sigh of relief and astonishment. Mira kept her hands open, showing that she meant no harm. The queen descended from her platform and approached Mira. You have acted wisely, she said, her voice calm but filled with authority. You protected my child without aggression. You showed courage without rage. This is the mark of a parent. The youngling ran to Mira and pressed its small hands against hers. Mira bent down, smiling gently. We are safe, she whispered. The court watched in stunned silence. Some nobles nodded slowly, their expressions softening. Others remained cautious but respectful. The message was clear. Mira had proven herself not with weapons or threats, but with calmness, courage, and the trust of the youngling. As the queen returned to her platform, she addressed the hall. The trial is complete. The one named parent has shown the strength of heart, the courage of mind, and the wisdom of patience. Let the court acknowledge that this one may guide the heir of Althara. Applause, clicks, and low hisses of approval echoed through the hall. Mira felt a wave of relief and pride, but also a sense of responsibility heavier than anything she had ever carried. She had won this challenge, but the work had only begun. Later, in the quiet of her chamber, Mira sat beside the youngling. It rested its head lightly against her arm, chirping softly. You were brave today, she said, her voice gentle. I could not have done this without you. The child chirped again, and Mira felt warmth spread through her chest. Their bond was growing stronger, a bridge between human and Althari. That night, Mira reflected on what had happened. She had faced opposition, danger, and fear. She had relied on calm empathy and trust rather than force. The court had begun to see her not as a stranger or a diplomat, but as a parent, a protector, and a guide. She realized that leadership was not about power, but about care and connection. The youngling curled up beside her, eyes closing. Mira placed a gentle hand on its back, feeling the steady pulse of life. She thought of the future, of the court, and of Earth waiting for her report. She knew there would be more challenges, more tests of courage and wisdom, but she also knew she was not alone. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new decisions, and perhaps new dangers. Yet Mira felt ready. She had faced the court, faced the challengers, and faced herself. And she had emerged stronger, guided by the trust of a small, determined child who had chosen her to shape the future. As the light of Althara's dawn faded into night, Mira held the youngling close, feeling the quiet power of a bond that could change the fate of two worlds. She was no longer just a visitor. She was a parent, and the court, the child, and perhaps the stars themselves would see what she could do. The throne hall of Althara shimmered in the soft morning light, its green crystal walls glowing like water under the rising sun. Today was the day of the official declaration. Every noble, advisor, and guard had gathered to witness the final recognition of Mira's role. The air was alive with quiet energy, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and anticipation. Mira walked beside the youngling, who clung to her hand with surprising trust. Together they approached the queen, who sat tall and calm on her platform, her silver streaks shining in the light. Mira took a deep breath. She remembered every challenge, every whisper of doubt, and every moment of trust shared with the child. She was no longer a visitor, no longer only a diplomat from Earth. She had become something greater, something both human and part of Althara's story. Her heart beat steadily as she stepped before the court. The queen raised her hand and the hall fell silent. "The court has witnessed trials, tests, and courage," she said, her voice carrying like the hum of distant stars. "The one named parent has proven herself not through force but through patience, empathy, and wisdom. Let it be known that this one will guide my offspring and serve as a protector to our future." Mira felt a wave of emotion. Her gaze fell on the youngling, who chirped softly, eyes shining. The child's small hand pressed against hers, warm and firm. Mira knelt slightly, bringing herself to its level. "We will walk together," she said quietly. "I will guide, but I will also learn." A ripple of acknowledgement moved through the court. Some nobles bowed deeply, others nodded, and even those who had opposed her before seemed to consider her with new respect. The queen descended from the platform and extended a long hand toward Mira. "Rise, guardian parent," she said. Her words were clear, strong, and final. Mira rose and felt a sense of weight and responsibility settle upon her shoulders. The title was more than ceremonial. It was a living promise to the child, to the court, and to Earth. She looked around at the assembly, seeing the mix of doubt and hope in their eyes. She realized that her mission was no longer just to negotiate a treaty. It was to help build a future where two worlds could coexist, guided by trust and care. The queen turned to the assembly. "Today marks a new era for Althara," she said. "A time when differences are bridges, not walls. Let us honor the one who has been named parent by my child. And let us honor the trust of this child who sees the future clearly." The hall filled with the clicking and hissing of approval. Mira felt the tension lift as the court accepted her presence not as an outsider, but as a true part of Althara's story. She looked down at the youngling, who chirped again, hopping slightly in excitement. Mira laughed softly, a sound that echoed lightly in the hall. For the first time, she felt completely at home in this alien world. Later, the queen invited Mira to walk through the palace gardens. The youngling skipped ahead, chattering happily. Mira followed, listening as the queen spoke of the history of Althara, of the old prophecies, and of the responsibility the court placed upon her shoulders. Mira listened with care, learning quickly. Every lesson, every tradition, every story became a part of her understanding of the world she now helped shape. The gardens were full of glowing plants and soft water streams, their colors brighter than anything on Earth. Mira knelt to touch a plant that pulsed with light. "It is beautiful," she said. "It feels alive, almost like it knows who walks here." The youngling chirped in agreement and pressed its small hand into hers. Mira felt the same warmth and trust as before, stronger than ever. "We will protect this world together," she whispered. In the following weeks, Mira worked closely with the court and the youngling. She helped organize councils where humans and Althari shared ideas, trained guards in ways to safeguard the youngling without fear, and participated in ceremonies that honored both species. Slowly, the nobles who had opposed her began to see her value, not as a foreigner, but as a bridge between worlds. Even soldiers who had doubted her courage now watched her with quiet respect, knowing she had faced dangers without fear and protected what mattered most. The youngling grew more confident, laughing and exploring with Mira nearby. The child began to understand words from Earth, while Mira learned more of the Althari language and customs. Together they became a living symbol of unity. Visitors from Earth watched with awe, realizing that diplomacy and courage could take forms far beyond treaties and negotiations. A simple gesture of trust between a human and a child had begun a bond that could last generations. On the day the treaty was signed officially, the hall echoed not only with clicks and hisses but also with the music of understanding. Mira stood with the youngling, hand in hand, as the Queen watched proudly. Cameras and recorders from Earth documented the moment, but Mira knew the true story was not the words on paper. The story was the bond, the trust, and the courage that had carried them all to this day. As the ceremony ended, Mira looked at the youngling and smiled. "We did it," she said softly. The child chirped in delight and pressed its small head against her arm. Mira felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and joy. She had come as a stranger, an envoy from a distant planet. Now she was a parent, a protector, and a friend to a child who would one day guide a world. The Queen placed her hand lightly on Mira's shoulder. "You have given us hope," she said, "not just for the child, but for all of Althara. Let this be remembered not for the title, but for the courage, care, and trust that built it." Mira nodded, feeling the truth of the words. The court had fallen silent that first day when the child spoke, and now they were silent again, but this time with respect and awe. A new era had begun, not through conquest or power, but through connection and trust. Mira held the youngling close, and together they stepped forward, ready to guide the future of two worlds.